So you come on class.
Mhm.
That's all
You what?
individual. And that's something.
That's not.
So you don't have to class. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how we do the planning board too.
Hey, Nat, you've been gone for a little while.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's just,
No.
this is a slightly different.
Tell me this,
They like rub it
does it
on
make,
us.
is this easier on the staff side?
It is.
It's what?
I don't think
Is
so.
the new software we're using
Do you know-
easier on the,
For the packet posting?
yeah,
To tell you the truth, I think from what Billy's described, I don't know, he's training the whole staff on Wednesday, but from what he's described, it actually is easier to manipulate the laser fiche, but I think the posting part is, we're still working through learning how to.
because I mean, listen, it's easier for staff, we can figure it out.
I just-
It's not
I just-
easier for staff.
I just
than
don't
bad
like
for us,
people
then-
get upset that
Some
just figured all
figure
this stuff out. You know what I mean? Like in the general thinking of things, you know?
It's like when we said earlier, like, to not be able to print an agenda.
I know, that's kind of wild.
Well, maybe we can have a little chat offline
How
after.
you do it?
the meeting,
How you
so
do it with-
Live and
No, I know.
recording
Okay,
and.
Right, there you go.
Well.
That's my fault.
this is the-
Welcome back now, you're on the hospital. All right, thank you all for coming and welcome to the NTD meeting for July 28th. I'll call the meeting to order. We have a quorum. I'll set the motion to approve the agenda. So moved. Second. All those in favor? And Bert is not on,
No,
so we're all good with Bert not.
Yeah.
We don't have to do. Okay.
so until, if or
And
when
he
Bert
comes
shows up,
on, we
then you
have to go
do
to a roll
call.
call.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Is there any public comment for items not on the agenda? Not, we move on to the minutes of April 28th and May 19th. Anyone have any errors, omissions?
I had a comment about the May minutes, which I just wanted to circle back with that. We set those aside.
Yep, sure can.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll just accept the motion on the 28th of April minutes.
So,
No second,
Second.
all those in favor?
I,
Excellent, thank you. Announcements, Megan, no, wasn't?
We have a few announcements. The seasonal advisories. Council meeting is going to be scheduled on Nantucket on Thursday, September 11th. Location to be determined. Megan is working on that with other people on the advisory council. So
And it's gonna be 11, not 10, sorry. That time changed after the meeting was posted.
Right.
And what, okay, that's good. Is this gonna be? And now, this is important.
Yes.
Is this gonna be known like? Something with the town
Yes.
website, will be meeting, et cetera?
Yes.
Okay,
It will be
okay,
widespread.
okay.
yeah,
We
It's gonna
wanna,
be at 4FG?
no,
It's gonna be,
we're trying to see if we can find an appropriate venue downtown because all these people.
Oh,
created with
the.
The boat,
Like the Stanton
you know, from the vineyard, from Boston, from other places, so
Nantucket
ideally,
Hotel, the Wham
yeah,
Museum.
so we're gonna reach out to a few places and as soon as we have that locked down, we'll start doing some
That's
public
fine.
outreach and.
Yeah.
Mhm.
People Hoover and all these people out
No.
there. No.
no, no, can I?
Yeah, fine.
Because I think you're right, it is important. I sat in on the, had like a seminar, webinar thing a couple of weeks ago. And it was really good, very informative. But it's not the slam dunk that I thought it sort of was, you know,
Yeah,
it's not.
you mean from the state side?
Yeah, because
Okay.
the people in Western Mass see this a little bit as oh, this is just a Cape and Islands thing. And it shouldn't be.
351 towns and cities.
So, there was that, and then there was. What really caught me by surprise, there was a lot of seasonal residents complaining about the residential tax exemption thing and all of that.
You're talking about from other places.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Sorry, I got it.
Yeah, not from here, but, so it just sounded like, I thought I was gonna be listening to, okay, this is 90% baked, and it didn't quite sound that way, I don't know.
Who's gonna be here from the legislators for us? We
So
got a
again,
spear
this is
here.
all just, you
Oh.
know, hot off the press, this date, I just found out on like Thursday or Friday, it was
Okay.
Thursday before I posted this.
We don't
Senator
know.
Seer typically attends, Secretary Augustus typically attends. Last in-person meeting in Provincetown, Lieutenant Governor Driscoll happened to be there for a separate event, so she attended with some people on her team, so it just depends.
We turn into an SDR if you're saying that thing, and nobody knew.
Don't even start.
I'm not sure it was quite that
Doesn't
bad.
fit, it doesn't fit every place. you know.
Killing me.
Okay, well, that's good. So we're gonna have plenty of notification and a downtown venue. Okay, the next item is the enabling legislation. We're gonna have something on the August
Well,
agenda or what?
staff is anticipating that we should bring it back
Yeah.
for some type of discussion, but we have
Yeah.
to take that up with the new chair and vice chair.
Okay,
So we just wanted to put something on here so you all don't think that it's fallen off our radar,
Yeah.
or that we're not thinking about it. We've just been waiting on a change of the officers.
Okay.
So that's that. And then I have a couple of things that aren't on here. Mike attended a Cape Cod Bridges forum over on the Cape, so we had some representation there. Mike also presented to the Wisconsin Civic League at their annual forum, maybe a month ago, a couple of weeks ago. He did a really great job. We heard a lot of like positive feedback from that. And Megan and I presented at the Civic League President's Breakfast about a month ago, and that went really, really well. So.
Any,
That's it.
were there any questions about, you know, the map, the plan stuff, or any of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so the reason why they invited us was to give an update on the master plan. And then they had a lot of questions about area plans and how those are going to work in. And so that was, you know, really good to have a face-to-face with people from a
Some
lot of
people.
different areas.
Good. Okay,
May I make a
Yes.
comment on the enabling legislation? Just as a lowly member of the board of the commission, I really hope it doesn't go past the votes. I really, you know, this is sort of the elephant in the room, and you know, I just hope we get to it sooner rather than later. Thank you.
agreed. I think that's good. And the more we, you know, we get it going sooner, the less we have to cram into one meeting or two meetings as well, so.
Brooke has just joined us online, so we'll have to do a roll call before.
Okay, no, that's okay. Brooke, can you hear us? Where is she?
So Brooke is in another meeting.
I can. I just left another meeting all the way out in Nantucket. I'm headed your way.
So you're driving on the meeting?
Shh.
Okay, so do you wanna? Are you able to, I don't wanna just, you know, just jump right into the next item, make sure you're all set.
Maybe pull over. Brooke.
I'm totally set. Just go.
Okay. Very good. All right, so the election officers, this is the month we do it, and we have. Now bylaws, the chair goes first, vice chair goes second. Is there any, we have a letter from Abby in the packet. You all read that, and I'll accept any motion for either, you know, her letter and her support. If there's any motion on the floor for another person, if that happens, we have to go to a email ballot or a paper ballot. So that would be my
Yeah.
comment. And you'll accept it, whatever motion comes forward.
Well, I'd like to make a motion to put forth Terry Rayford for the chair.
Okay, so what we have to do then is go to, do you want to do an email one or do you
Well,
want to
is there
do?
a second for that?
Okay.
That's a surprise
Yeah,
to me.
no.
Thank you, John.
I'm sorry, I was thinking of just the after. Okay. I don't think we have to do a second. Because.
We do a second and Hillary has to agree.
Yeah.
Agree to it, okay, no, that's good.
Yeah.
No, okay, got it, agree to the acceptance of this, yeah, I got it. Sorry about that, okay, so is there a second for Hillary being nominee?
There's a second.
All those in favor? Oh, we gotta go by roll call, sorry about that, Dave?
I'm sorry.
No, there's no roll call.
No, we have
No, there's no vote.
Yeah.
She's just now.
Oh,
she's
okay.
nominating- if-
Oh,
if-
just a second.
Yeah.
Just a
Yes.
second.
Yeah.
See, I've been doing this a long time. I don't remember this ever happening once. So that's why I'm a little, and I thought that because Brooke is on in her car that we had to go to a roll call.
Not for.
Don't
Not
do it
for that.
by the-
Okay, got it.
It's
Very good. I got it
And
now.
then-
But just Hillary has to accept.
The
it.
informal second of her accepting the nomination. Okay.
Well, I guess I'd like to discuss it. I mean, John, thank you for the vote of confidence, and Christina, thank you. It's a surprise to me. I certainly didn't expect to be suggested to be chair. I, would be frankly a little surprised if they're, well, I don't know. I mean, there's no point in going to a vote if there's not other folks that would be excited about that idea. I know Abby has been working very hard and working on a lot of things and, yeah, I guess I would like to maybe wait another year, and I'd like to support Abby if she'd like to be chair,
Okay,
but I appreciate that.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's, I like what you said.
Yeah.
That was good. That's kind of a Nantucket thing right there. So, yeah. Okay, so with that said. Anyone want to make a motion?
I'll put a motion for Abigail Molina as chair. Mike Israel vice chair.
Just her first, Joe. Okay,
I'll second Joe's motion.
yep. Is all those in favor? Roll call, yeah. Dave,
Aye.
Joe,
Aye.
John,
I,
Hillary,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Christina.
Aye.
Liza.
Aye.
Brooke, can you hear me?
Yep, I.
Amazing. And Abby,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Welcome,
Congrats.
welcome, or congrats, or here we are at the trailer.
All right, I'll repeat.
And I will stay chair for just this next thing, right? Is that how this works, Roseanne?
Well, technically, you've just elected a new chair.
So I'm supposed to technically stop the next thing? Okay, I
Yes.
wasn't sure about that one part.
We'll pass the baton.
Do you have, this is how I write everyone, you forget the names, I'll tell you right now. You can forget it in 2 seconds.
Thank you. All right, are there any motions on the floor for the nominee for vice chair?
Repeat what I just said.
Okay.
Okay, Mike Mazzarelli as vice chair.
I would like to ask Hillary question is, you feel the same way, vice chair as the chair?
No, I actually would consider putting my name in for vice chair. I think they do bring something different to the table with all due respect to Mike. I mean, even though I'm also new, I really do know the commission really well and I work. But I'd also support Mike, so I don't know if there's a second for me from somebody other than Christina.
So I would put forward the motion for.
And I enjoy working with Abby.
Okay. Oh, sorry. I was sharing.
I guess the question is there anyone who wants to second that motion?
My motion or their motion?
Well, I guess
That's an acceptance thing.
Mike's already nominated, he put in a letter of interest. So this is a second potential candidate,
Yes.
subject to a second of that John's motion.
so. I guess is there a second for John's motion?
Well,
I'll
second it, but it's more a question, is there any other support? So. I don't see any other support as this side, but I'll support Mike.
Okay. Are there any other motions for the vice chair?
Mike Mazzarelli as vice chair.
Okay, is there a second for that?
I'll second that.
Okay. Dave, on Joe's motion to appoint Mike Mazzarelli as vice chair,
Aye.
Joe,
Aye.
John,
I,
Hillary,
Aye.
Mike.
Aye.
Christina,
Aye.
Liza,
Aye.
Brooke, can you hear me?
Yep, I.
Okay, Nat,
Aye.
and as the chair, I also vote aye. So,
Thank you.
Congratulations.
welcome, Mike.
Thank you.
Okay, the next thing we have are committee appointments. And so the first one, the capital program committee, that one is currently vacant. John resigned from it. So, are there any, is there anybody who's interested in serving on
I'd be interested in serving on it.
it?
I had a conversation with Jill Beat today and she kind of explained to me what is entailed and the time obligations, and I think I can meet those.
Great is awesome.
Do we need to do a motion?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so is there a motion for the capital?
Make that motion.
Just looking, okay. All right, on Dave's motion to appoint Liza to the capital program committee. Dave on the motion.
Aye.
Joe,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Hillary,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Christina,
Aye.
Liza,
Aye.
Nat,
Aye.
Brooke.
Yes.
Aye, is that an aye?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yes,
And-
I,
Okay, great, and as the chair, I also vote aye, so, Liza, good luck.
Okay, fine.
Yes, you may.
Yes.
I was on Capitol for like 7 years-ish.
Yeah.
6, 7.
She mentioned that you were on it.
You're gonna be a rocket scientist within 3 years. It's unbelievable, and it's good for somebody younger that's not leaving to be involved in this, because it's unbelievable, and you're gonna be really, I'm not gonna say you're excited about how many meetings you have in such a short amount of time, but you're
Yeah.
gonna learn a lot,
Yeah, it sounds like it.
so it's good. So thank you for doing this.
I'm looking
That's
forward to
right.
it. Thanks.
All right, the next appointment is the Affordable Housing Trust. I'm currently serving, I'm happy to continue serving. So.
I make that motion for Andy to stay as our representative.
All right, Dave.
Aye.
Joe,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Hillary.
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Christina.
Aye.
Liza,
Aye.
Brooke,
I,
Nat,
Aye.
and I as chair also vote aye. This one's currently vacant, the Contract Review Committee of Human Services.
Yeah, and well, there's been some discussion at the select board about possibly restructuring this in some way. So, and it's, I think, a pretty big time commitment, which is why we haven't had a representative. So if you want to hold off on that until we have more information, I think that would be fine.
Okay. I mean,
if I may, Madam Chair.
Yeah, you may.
Yeah, so yes, to Leslie's point, a review of the human services org structure, as it were, is being finalized, and there'll be some recommendations. One of which from me to the Human Services Department, that the NPNEDC be allowed to appoint someone not on the NPNEDC or to convert it to an at-large seat.
All right, great. So we will hold off on that point. For BPAC, currently it's Joe.
I would stay on. Make that motion.
Second. Okay, motion by Nat, second by Mike to, make Joe as the BPAC rep. Dave?
Aye.
Joe?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Hillary?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Christina?
Aye.
Liza?
Aye.
Brooke?
I,
Nat?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. The next one is the Harbor Plan Update Committee. Christina's currently our,
So I'd like to continue on, even though I have not gotten to a meeting yet, but I will continue to follow that through, and they're almost done anyway, so. I'll
Yeah, it's
present
been
the
going
plan.
on a long time.
Because your consistency, I will vote for you to remain on that. And honesty about it.
is that a motion?
That's a motion.
You're gonna second the
I'll
motion?
second it.
Okay, motion by Joe, second
know it.
by Nat. To keep Christina as
It's
our
very funny.
derelict representative to the harbor plan. It's okay, she knows what's going on, whatever. Dave,
Aye.
Joe, John,
Aye.
Hillary,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Christina,
Hi.
Liza, aye, Brooke,
Aye.
Nat,
Aye.
and I vote
Yeah.
aye. Great.
One, since I.
So the last appointment is the Nantucket Area Plan Work Group. Joe is currently on that one.
Stay on that one.
Yeah, you have to,
Landed in a tunnel,
you have to,
unless it's a train coming the other way. But no, I definitely want to stay on it.
Okay,
So
any motion?
I'll make that motion, you put Joe Toppin for this.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Nat, second by Dave. To keep Joe as our representative to the Nantucket Area Plan Work Group. Dave.
Aye.
Joe.
Aye.
John.
Aye.
Hillary.
Aye.
Mike.
Aye.
Christina.
Aye.
Liza.
Aye.
Brooke.
Aye.
Nat.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Okay, the next thing on our agenda is the Safe Streets and Roads for All presentation. I think, Mike, you're gonna lead this, if I'm not mistaken.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If it's all right, we have a team from our consulting group led by Kittleson Associates, but we're also been working closely with Nelson Nygaard and Zach Gavel and Drew Van Hengel are here to actually present the full set of slides for the draft traffic safety action plan. And I'm going to ask Zach if he's prepared to maybe share the slide deck. And Madam Chair, we did do a bit of a soft rollout last month of some of this. This is a little bit more of a detailed presentation. Zach and Drew are going to review the safe system approach and the vision and goals that we talked about last month, and then go into some other detailed actions. And he's going to conclude with you all will be requested to authorize a public review of this draft traffic safety action plan after the presentation. So with that, I'll hand it over to Drew and let him run through the slides here and
Great,
take the action at the end.
great. Hi, I'm Drew Van Hengel, a National Safety Co-Lead in the practice of active transportation and safety at Nelson Nygaard, joined by my colleague Zach Gable. As Mike said, we've been working with him and others on the island for about a year now to get to this point. It's very exciting for us to give you an overview of the safety action plan and culminate in the request for release for public review. On the next page, there's the agenda for our presentation, which we're trying to keep pretty brief to receive your comments. We'll give an overview of the approach to developing this plan, shed some light on the vision and goals for your plan, talk about the engagement and the crash analysis and the location prioritization that we completed in the drafting of the plan, discuss some of the treatments and strategies at some key locations, and then talk about the next steps, which are the recommendation for you. So just as some background on safety action planning and your work here on Nantucket, there was a collaborative approach to develop an application to the Safe Streets and Roads for All program at the US DOT. You won that grant in 2023 in collaboration with Martha's Vineyard and Franklin County. The focus of the application was the uniqueness of the roads on your island, on the islands generally, and in Franklin County. So we focused on rural road typologies and context-sensitive treatments that focus on how to address crashes and prevent crashes on those types of roads. Completion of this plan positions you well for the remaining year of implementation funding through the SS4A, or Safe Streets and Roads for All program, and also for MassDOT technical assistance, as well as other funding opportunities downstream. The approach to the plan is consistent with the funding source. So we set about with some goal and vision setting, developed the crash report and that illuminated the crash trends, both with respect to behaviors and places that crashes have been happening. Got feedback from engagement with the community, recommended some roadway design changes and potential locations for application. Also importantly, not only focused on responding to places that crashes have happened, but looking forward to places like that to prevent crashes from happening there in the future through both infrastructure recommendations and non-infrastructure recommendations, programs and policy changes, things like that. And then some what we call buckets of emphasis areas moving forward in implementation. This approach to safety is consistent with the funding requirements. It's also consistent with a kind of a new way we're looking at traffic safety generally, which I'll talk about in a couple of slides. This slide describes the process that we've been undertaking, about a 19-month process, more or less, to that started in January of 2024 with the crash analysis, as we described, led by Kittleson and informed by Nelson Nygaard's expertise. Refining the types of places that crashes have been happening with the typologies and then treatment specific to those in the late summer, early fall of last year. Developing some specific policies and practice tools and talking about their suitability for the island in tandem with developing and prioritizing projects and project locations. We've been drafting the plan for the better part of the spring and summer to bring it to its state of readiness now. And throughout that whole planning process, having some check-ins with stakeholders, including yourselves, public forum, and community engagement in person and online. So just a second about what the Safe Systems approach is and why it's a little bit different. Safe Systems changes the way the industry's been looking at traffic safety by acknowledging that there's shared responsibility to design, maintain, operate, and use our roads to prevent serious injury crashes from happening, and then to prevent those that do happen from having fatal outcomes. And this is done using a data-driven and community-informed approach that results in programs, projects, and procedural changes that put safety first. Just a little bit of a look back in the way that we used to do this. We used to talk about preventing all crashes, but what we really, the Safe Systems approach says, let's prevent the serious crashes from happening, understanding that property damage only crashes have a very different social and economic impact than those more serious crashes. And so really focusing on the crashes that matter most. We used to talk about human behavior more, thinking that there may be bad actors or bad decisions that cause crashes, but really with the Safe Systems approach, we're looking at acknowledging that people make mistakes and that we need to design for those. And one of the ways we design for those is to have slower speeds, slower streets, and also separation in time and space of conflicting modes and conflicting movements that happen on our streets. And by taking this approach that acknowledges that people make mistakes, we also take the companion approach, which says people also have responsibilities as they use our roads, and we want to make sure they're aware of them and that they are practicing good behavior within the confines of what we'd expect with them with the high quality roads that we design, maintain, and operate. And finally, we not only look back at crashes that happen, but we take a systemic approach that says, well, and we understand what happens, where crashes have happened, and we understand what types of places they happen on, and we know that there, but for chance, could be other places that are closely aligned or have attributes in common with those places that crashes have been happening, and take a systemic approach and look at those places that have common lane configurations or curves or traffic control treatments and say, there hasn't been a crash in that place yet that has common attributes as places that crashes have been happening, but we want to prevent them from happening in the first place. So what can we do across the island in places that have that are the same type, so to speak? So looking back and looking forward with data. And then on the next slide, Zach, please. By looking at the root causes of injurious crashes and creating actions to prevent them and address mistakes when they do happen, we create kind of a wraparound approach to traffic safety so y'all will be better equipped for a future of zero fatal outcome crashes. And the pillars in this Safe Systems approach are aligned with the newer way of thinking about traffic safety, and they are helping people to be safer, helping vehicles to be safer, safer speeds, safer roads that eliminate conflicting movements from happening at the same time, as an example, and post-crash care, which is particularly important for a place like Nantucket, where the medical resources are limited and people may need to be taken off island when crashes do happen that are serious. So moving from like the high level overview of what safe systems and a safe systems approach to traffic safety is, and looking at your plan and particularly consistent with your long range transportation plan, this plan envisions a safe, accessible, and affordable transportation system with vehicle limitations, and it's sensitive to the island. So we built this plan on your pre-existing planning documentation and levels of agreement that have been come previously before we started this work. And moving forward through this plan, Nantucket, and your goal is to reduce fatal and serious injury crashes, which happen at a rate of about 3.8 per year, by 50% to an average of 2 per year by 2030, and then reducing to 75% from today's or the crash period, the analysis period forward by 2040 to an average of 1 per year, with an ultimate goal of 0 fatal or serious injury crashes on the island. And what this says is that you're looking at a downward slope where the ultimate goal is that the slope reaches 0 over time outside of the planning horizon past the 2040 year. There are goals within the safety action plan that help to answer the question of how can you get to 0? How can that be a rational and reasonable target for future fatal injury crash outcomes? And they include strengthening partnerships and coordination, ongoing community engagement, implementing changes to roadway design that are consistent with the community character, utilizing data-informed approaches, reviewing safety policies, programs, and processes to ensure we're putting safety first, pairing education and enforcement with infrastructure changes or with themselves specifically to address behaviors that are causing crashes, effective post-crash care and response to causal factors, and monitoring and transparently reporting progress. And these goals, sub-goals, we should say, are also consistent with the SS4A and other funding sources, and really signal to funders that you are taking a safe systems approach to traffic safety on Nantucket. So what did we hear from the community? As indicated, we've been having touch points episodically throughout the course of the planning. We were hosted with an island-wide safety tour with many of your staff in the summer of 2024, including fire department and police department representatives. We conducted an online survey and map subsequent to that visit, and we received 1,200 responses to an online survey and over 2,200 dots added cumulatively on online maps, and the dots represented places that people were concerned about or places that they had ideas about improved traffic safety, as well as some qualitative information about how people are using the roads. There was a select board and commission joint meeting in the winter of 2024. And we've been providing ongoing briefings of key groups by staff, either with Nelson Nygaard support or Mike on his own. Just a couple of slides about the engagement. This is us on the safety visit, exploring some of the locations of concern related to safety and conflict, and maybe ambiguity about how people are supposed to behave when they're using certain types of roads on the island. Specifically, one of the things we talked about is the expectation of users of the side paths compared to people driving cars at key intersections on streets like Surfside. On the next slide, some overall impressions. This is all in a detailed packet for your review subsequently, so I won't go over it in real big detail, but the green and blue combined on this graph are perceptions where people said they felt somewhat safe in blue or very safe in green. Interestingly, the perceived level of safety is equally high for transit and driving, and drops considerably for people walking, using wheelchairs, biking, and mopeds. On the next slide, similarly, these findings of safety by common roadway user type imply that people feel safer when the safety context is within their control, for example, as a driver, but less so when vulnerable, being outside of the notable safety elements that are within vehicles that aren't available to people walking or biking, and also sensitive to the vulnerability of older adults and younger people using the roads due to perhaps their their limitations with respect to what they, how their timeliness and response, and reaction to activities that are happening on the street. A little bit about the December joint meeting with the select board. This included overview of the road safety action plan process, a more lengthy version of what I shared with you previously, crash history and existing conditions, an overview of proven safety and countermeasures, and a conversation about their applicability on Nantucket, future outreach opportunities that were in front of us at that time, public reaction to the existing conditions, and about trade-offs in roadway design, and then an open question and answer period. At last month's meeting, Mike reviewed the plans and goals and objectives, and those are the same as those at which we opened this presentation with. And this is just a screenshot of that meeting with you all. So I might turn it over to Zach at this time to talk about the historical crash trends and the high injury network.
Great, thanks, Drew,
projects.
and thanks everyone. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes talking through some of the nuts and bolts of the data and the effort that we went through to develop some of the existing conditions, which informs in tandem with all the engagement that we did and the really robust response that we got from the island, what some of the plan's recommendations are. So just at a very high level, the crash trends are, as you would imagine, substantially higher in the summer and during the midday period. And single vehicle crashes ended up accounting for most of the fatal and serious injury crashes on the island. So that's people driving off of the road, hitting things like trees or other fixed objects, or crashing into animals, namely deer. We saw a number of crashes involving vulnerable roadway users. They're only 5% of the overall crashes, but they're about a fifth of all crashes that had a reported injury. So really a disproportionate number of those crashes involving injury involve someone who's walking, biking, or generally outside of a vehicle. And those are most likely occurring at intersections and often occurring in sort of the town context of the island. They're less common mid-island, and they're even less common as you get further out. And then, so we took all of that and we said, okay, that's interesting, but where does this all lay out in space across the island? Where are these crashes happening? And we conducted what we call a network screening, which really looks at what roads are the particular hotspots for crashes, particularly those that have the worst outcomes. And what we noticed is that there's a lot of crashes that are concentrated around town more so than in rural areas. And those rural crashes are more concentrated at transition points where the road's either becoming increasingly rural as the land use adjacent to it is, or is sort of transitioning into a more commercial or residential or built up area, and at curves. But what we noticed, and this was true across all three of the jurisdictions, Martha's Vineyard and Franklin County as well, was that those rural crashes tended to be more severe. And that was often a product of higher speed environments and people deviating from the roadway and striking things outside of the roadway. And so to that earlier point of when those crashes are happening, you see that really clear spike June, July, and August. We're sort of in that period right now. And I'll note that the crash data that we had is from 2018 to 2022. So the public engagement really helped round out our understanding of the data following 2022, what's been happening pretty much up until this point. Another thing that we noticed was that in the winter months, we were seeing a higher percentage of the total number of crashes that were resulting in those more severe outcomes. So while I think a lot of folks rightly would key in on the middle of that chart, the summer months, there is still work to be done in the off season, particularly as the roads might become a little bit less congested. Folks might feel a little more inclined to open it up. The speeds get a little bit higher. And we end up with worse safety outcomes. And that's something that we saw in the data. While the number of crashes total were lower, the percentage of this overall severity was higher. Similar trends here to the point earlier, single vehicle crashes are that represent over half of those severe crashes on the island. Some other trends that we noticed that was the crashes were more severe on Nantucket than they were on average statewide, or for crashes involving side swipes in opposite directions, so cars that are deviating from their lane and crashing into oncoming cars, not head on, but swiping each other in the opposite direction, and crashes involving people biking. So we noticed those three as sort of slightly, not even slightly, on average more severe on the island than they were statewide. But we're still looking at some of those types at the top of the chart, including the angle crashes and the single vehicle crashes, as the ones that have the greatest number of severe crashes. And then to think a little bit also about what's contributing to crashes. It's not always just about the intersection or the roadway alignment. Sometimes it is also about the user behavior that's driving some of the crash trends. And so we're fortunate that the police reporting on Nantucket provides us a really clear sample of contributing factors for crashes. That's not the case across all jurisdictions. And what we noticed was that there was a number of crashes that were involving distraction or otherwise improper driving. And then folks that were either failing to yield, that can be at intersections, or departing their travel lane or traveling at an unsafe speed. So really what we wanted to do with all of this was start to think about how we put this all together into a suite of safety solutions, whether those are infrastructure based or non-infrastructure based, and how we can use the data that we have right now to inform how we think about how we can be proactive about safety in the future. And so to sort of take it away from charts and put it closer to something that might feel a little bit more meaningful for you all, we did what's called a screening analysis, which was where we assign the crashes to the roadway and look to see where there's hotspots of crashes. And so those blue lines are locations that had the highest number of severe crashes, and then the yellow lines are that next tier down. And so really an opportunity for us to think about those as focal points for infrastructure projects, but also for education, for enforcement, places where we can get the most bang for our safety buck. And what I will say also is in your meeting packet is the full safety action plan. It is a lengthy document, but there is a significantly larger sample of maps and figures if that's your speed and if that's something that you want to dive into a little bit more. There's a lot more in there for you to take a look at. And so what we took that map and we started to think about how we can sort of bite size it into something that makes a little bit more sense for you all to bite off as an initial sort of passive safety projects, things that you could think about doing within a realistic planning horizon. And so we worked with Mike and we heard through the public engagement process as well, sort of what the priorities were for safety on the island, focusing still on that crash history, but also thinking about how we can pull in things like crash risk, locations where we heard a significant amount of feedback from the public about safety concerns, equity, access to transit, closing gaps for people that are walking and biking, tying in the work that's also being done around coastal resilience, and then also sort of proximity to key community destinations. So whether that's libraries, schools, places that we know are just general trip drivers, places that people want to go to, thinking about how we can put some emphasis on those locations, even if they might not have existing crashes today. And so through that process, we identified 5 different corridors that might be good priorities, good starting places. And we started to sketch out what sorts of safety solutions might be most appropriate for those places, understanding that the level that we're working at here is a planning level. And so there's going to need to be additional work that happens at each of these locations to sort of bring them up to a point where you'd say, this is a project that we're ready to approve and put out to bid for construction. We're not there yet, but we're starting to focus in a little bit on what this plan will recommend. And get to a point where you have a sort of cohesive set of recommendations as opposed to a big map with a lot of lines that's hard to parse through.
And just for the benefit of everybody, Zach, could you name the corridors that are in the legend, those 5?
Yes, yep, happy to. So it's Old South Road, Surfside Road, Sparks Ave, Bartlett Road, and Pleasant Street. And the safety action plan itself has about a page of text for each of those corridors, enumerating some of the safety challenges that we saw, helping to understand why they might have been elevated compared to other corridors on the island, and also noting what the crash history of those locations is, so that if you're thinking through, and I'll jump ahead on my next slide here, if we're thinking through this as a process, right, where we started with identifying what those high crash locations were, then we prioritized, and then we start to think about what solutions are appropriate based on the trends that we see, that the crash data that's included in the safety action plan itself can provide you good insight into how we came to some of the recommendations that we're making, again, at a concept level. And so those countermeasures are selected on a number of different criteria. It's fundamentally about what's most appropriate based on the crash types that we see, but it's also thinking about how we can improve safety for all roadway users. Of course, the appropriateness of different solutions in the local context specifically for the island, and then its ability to be implemented, right? There's going to be some solutions that are, relatively inexpensive to put in the ground and relatively quick to do. And then there's going to be some that are larger capital projects that might need to go through the tip or, have just a longer funding horizon to make happen. So we're also trying to be sensitive to that as well. I'll give you an example of what this looks like, and you'll note, again, really concept level here, not something that you would bid out, not an engineering document, a sort of a first pass at chewing on these corridors a little bit more and thinking through what sorts of recommendations are appropriate and at a variety of different scales. So you're going to see things in here that are, quick upgrades to transit stops, quick restriping of crosswalks that are already existing today, all the way up through, let's think about, how we can redesign this intersection to function a little bit better from both a congestion perspective, specifically on Old South Road, but also a safety perspective. And so, really a variety of scales here to think about how we can piece all of these different recommendations together. You'll see a summary on the left-hand side. I'm not going to read all of those, but again, an opportunity to start to think about how these corridors could come together as something more cohesive. And then I'll give you another example that's Surfside Road. So Old South Road, we identified as the sort of top priority corridor just based on the safety data. Surfside Road is the number 2 corridor based on the safety data. What we heard in the select board and the joint meeting with you all in the select board late last year was that there's some intersection projects on here right now that are going to need a little bit more time. But we wanted to include this as an example also to say that there are things that can be done in the interim while those larger scale projects are still working through the community process and through engineering and design. And then I'll also say not everything is going to be tied to a specific place within the plan. We offer what's called systemic recommendations. And so these are recommendations that are appropriate at a number of different locations that have similar characteristics. And the goal here is really, in addition to a cost effectiveness goal where you can say, let's, order a bunch of signs all at once, or let's do a similar treatment all at once, as opposed to doing it over and over again. There's also an opportunity to be proactive with these sorts of treatments and to say, we're seeing a trend of, concerning crashes at places that look like this. Let's see if there's any other places that also look like have similar trends or similar characteristics, where we're not seeing a lot of crashes right now, and sort of get ahead of the problem. And so some of those recommendations are things like looking at the shared use path network. Are there opportunities to expand that? Thinking about high visibility crossings on the side path and standardizing how side paths are treated. Routine maintenance, things like restriping crosswalks, making sure signs aren't faded, center lines, all of that. And then especially as you get out into the more rural parts of the island, how can we prevent folks from driving out of their lane or off of the road? There's a number of different treatments that have proven to be successful in other contexts and on the island to do that. And so all of this is an opportunity to think about some lower cost, but sort of wider spread applications that will benefit safety island-wide. And then I'll start to wind down here. Not everything is going to be a roadway improvement as well, right? It's not all going to be infrastructure-based things. Some of it is also going to be non-engineering strategies. And so a lot of text on this slide, I'll summarize to say, this is things like, how can we educate folks and do a better job of enforcing things like distracted or impaired driving? How can we target that both to folks that live on the island year round, but also folks that are visiting and might be less familiar with the island customs and just the general sort of way of being on the island and getting around? Continuing to do things like community engagement, opportunities to talk more about what traffic calming means and why slower speeds really can be safer for everyone across the island, including vehicle choice as well. As more and more folks are looking towards lower speed vehicles on the island, how can we design and think about designing roads for that reality? And then, just generally education, reporting, and crash data reporting and things like that. So a whole suite of things. And I think the goal here, to Drew's point earlier, is really to sort of put our arms around the safety problem to the extent that we can, to have a holistic approach, and to think about ways that we can build in redundancy into the way that we're thinking about safety on the island, such that if folks are inclined to drive too fast on the road, how do we mitigate that from being a life-changing outcome for someone? And just pairing the infrastructure with the non-infrastructure to build a comprehensive set of strategies for you all. So I'll turn it back over to Drew and we'll wrap up, and then we're eager to hear your thoughts and take questions.
Great, thanks so much, Zach. Just reiterating what adoption of the Road Safety Action Plan means for Nantucket and the commitment moving forward should that be the outcome. The action plan emphasizes that that you believe that no one should be killed or seriously injured on island roads. It provides it also provides a roadmap to sustain momentum towards roadway safety. In other words, a document you will look back to inform decisions moving forward. It recognizes your commitment to making progress towards the plan's goal and vision and the contributions of community members, consistent with all of this is consistent with the Safe Streets and Road for All, but also consistent with great practice. Requires regular reporting and transparency of progress toward crash reduction goals, like that you will be measuring things that matter to make sure you're addressing the underlying causes of crashes to get towards that goal. It importantly unlocks the potential for the Commission to apply for additional federal funding through the Safe Streets and Roads for All program. And it offers a supplemental data source and a set of prioritization factors which could be considered outside of this plan in local and regional roadway planning and engineering efforts, kind of a touch base to circle back when scoping capital and roadway maintenance projects are about to be scoped to ensure that the issues that have been illuminated through this planning process are thought about in scoping and budgeting projects. So we really commend you for getting to this point in the planning process, also to this point in our presentation. The next steps for the adoption of the plan would be its release for public comment. We propose on August 1st through August 21st, which would include this recording of this meeting. Consideration, a motion and consideration to adopt, discussion to adopt the traffic safety action plan at the August 25th meeting, contingent on the results of the public comment period and our sufficiency in addressing them in any revised documentation. And today, we'd just like to open the discussion to you of the plan contents, any questions you might have on the plan itself or our presentation, and subsequent to that, consider a motion to release the plan to public comment. And I think it's in your packet, but the motion would be to authorize the release of the Traffic Safety Action Plan for a 21-day public comment period beginning on August 1st and concluding on August 21st. So with that, we can stop screen sharing and entertain any questions from you.
Does anybody have any questions?
I got too many. Well, I want Joe to go first. I've got like 3 of Joe's written down already.
No, go ahead.
Hey, you off?
No, welcome back.
E-bikes weren't mentioned in this presentation. And I'm not saying they should have been, I'm just saying that is like a huge issue here right now as far as like how to deal with them. They're the greatest thing ever invented, but they're also really dangerous because the people that are driving them are kids and they just don't know any better. I mean, that's basically what's wrong. So that's one thing, and Joe has a lot of comments on that from the bike, from his, he's on DPAC. So I want to talk a little bit about speed limits. So you know about the 25-mile-an-hour enforcement number, obviously, that's your job to know that. It used to be 30 here. But that doesn't mean, and we had a discussion, you should actually watch the meeting, the select board meeting, not the last one, the one before, about Gold Star Drive being a cut through. You cannot make it up. Everything that's wrong and right about Nantucket happened in that meeting. I can't even believe the conversation. But the real solution to that is just put 15-mile-an-hour speed limits. Doesn't matter if it's not enforceable. People don't know that. How many people know what enforceable is on this island? Like 1%? Like nobody knows about that stuff. We have a 25-mile-an-hour sign on Boulevard. but we can't do something about Gold Star Drive. That's kind of ridiculous. We have a lot of speed limits in Nantucket that are old numbers. That like have just been there forever, like Cliff Road. To basically, I don't know where it goes to 25, but it's 40 miles an hour on Cliff Road. Are you kidding me? Like, why is that there? Because it's been there forever. The sign is old. It's just no one's ever looked at it. There's a lot of places that we could slow down, put 30, 35. Because it's the right thing, regardless of whether it's been this way forever, just leave it. There needs to be a lot of evaluation on speeds. And then, what was the other thing I had here? You didn't mention roundabouts. And this community has rejected roundabouts, except for the one looking out this window that works perfectly fine. And it's one of the smartest things we ever did, but it's 18 years ago now when that was done. Now they're too expensive. So we're probably not gonna be doing any except for the one, hopefully on nobody yet, for sure. So when you guys were driving around here with Mike or whatever you were doing, you must have saw so many things that made no sense to you. Completely didn't make sense. And I'm curious about that because there's a lot of things here that just can't be fixed in a traditional way. Like using your left directional to go straight in two spots, Union Street and Francis, and Washington and Francis. If you don't tap your left directional, you're gonna get whacked if you don't pay attention, especially in the summer. So I'm just curious what you think about, you did mention non-traditional in your comments, which I thought was great. So that means you picked up on all that stuff somehow. Somebody talked to you about it because this place is loaded with that. So anyway, that's it. Thank you very much for your time to Nantucket dealing with all this.
Thank you for your comment, Commissioner. There are a lot of subjects there, so we're going to address e-bike data and safety. We're going to talk about speed limits. There was a curiosity about what we observed. Just to make it clear for your benefit, all of us on this team have been on Nantucket multiple times, not only during the times of our visits with Mike and your staff. So over the years, we have accumulated wisdom of our professional and personal experiences. So want to just make sure you all know that we haven't just been there twice. And so I think the third item is like unusual things that only local folks know need to be done to be safe. And that would be the fourth. The third one was roundabouts, I think.
Yeah.
And so on the subject of e-bikes, I'm going to just turn it over to Zach for a minute to talk about the limitations of our data. As we talked about, this is a data first project informed by community wisdom. And unfortunately, the data and the community wisdom are not always caught up with each other. So Zach, is there anything specific that you can add about e-bike crashes from the reported crashes?
Yeah, I would just say we don't have the ability with the existing crash data to differentiate a traditional bicycle from an e-bike right now. And so just to the extent that you can work with local law enforcement to keep track of that data locally, that can certainly inform what solutions you might be able to come up with and where they might need to target, whether it's education or enforcement of your existing e-bike laws and the speeds that those are restricted to. That's really all I can say on that. Is just that we don't necessarily right now have the ability to parse that data the way we'd like.
Yeah, thanks so much. And that's a common problem throughout the country, that the crash report farms aren't keeping up with technology. So you'll see recommendations related to local practices, as Zach implied, that, this might be something to keep track of locally so that in the future you can track changes in e-bike involvement in crashes and their severity. We do recommend changes in the way communications are made about e-bikes. One of the things we're doing across the country, which I think would be applicable here, is people don't really understand how heavy and fast they move, and therefore how long and how far it takes for them to stop to prevent being involved in a crash. And just having simple, high informational graphics that share, the the differences between stopping distance, as an example for e-bikes versus regular bikes, is very helpful. It takes a lot longer to stop those bikes, as you know. Speed limits. I would need your police chief to be here to talk about what the wisdom of setting unenforceable speed limits. One way to set enforceable speed limits is to consider and craft a island-wide speed limit of 15 miles per hour that is enforceable everywhere. I mean, we would not be so bold as to make that recommendation, but in this meeting, but we would say that posting speed limits that are unenforceable is not best practice. But you can create slower speed limits that are enforceable as an implementation step of this action plan. Mike, did you want to weigh in anything on that speed limit conversation?
Yeah, just I think we got a little bit ahead of the cart with a piloting of a speed feedback sign, and then we had a town meeting article this last spring that kind of approved 4 locations on island for at least making drivers aware that there's a speed limit change. We can kind of tune out the built environment sometimes and not pay attention to signs, but that's a good way to kind of serve as a reminder when we transition from, say, the country areas into the town areas, from a low density environment to the thickly settled environments where they have the 25 miles an hour. So those are good reminders. And I think that the community should be proud for approving, being a little bit proactive and not waiting on a traffic safety action plan, but actually going ahead and doing initiatives like that. And I'll just note that Joe Topham, there at the table there, got a very progressive too with the e-bikes. Now the local community has definitions of the very unsafe class 3, what I'll say moped. But a class 3 bicycle that goes faster than 20 miles an hour. It's effectively a moped. Just our state laws haven't caught up with the wisdom of the local community on that. So I think, I think we all appreciate Joe for at least bringing that forward and trying to get the conversation started at the state level, because that's honestly, that's where the solution is changing the state law to allow the enforceability and prohibit those class 3 bikes on the island. And I'll just remind everybody that we do have an e-bike classification sticker system that has a Nantucket theme, that you can have a sticker and try to be let the community know that you have a class 1 or a 2 by putting a sticker on your bike. And just to reinforce Drew's note too, Drew's like a routine visitor to the island. She comes there like every year. It's a great person to have a conversation with. She stays in town, and like I was kind of blown away my first conversation with her, just how familiar with the island she was. So they're not from California or some other place in the country doing this remotely. I mean, they actually have hands-on familiarity with the island, and it helped a lot of our conversations, especially when we're talking about sensitivity to the island and historic traditions. The team was very aware of that and very sensitive to that when crafting this plan. That's why you don't see some things in here that I think we'd have a hard time explaining away. Those were screened out, and they're not in our safety countermeasure toolbox, and that was through some effort, but not a lot of arm wringing to make sure that they're out. They were very aware that Nantucket was a special place and historic integrity is paramount.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. And I feel like that kind of addresses the remaining 2 elements related to the discussion of roundabout. There is discussion of roundabout in the plan itself, and it is an effective safety countermeasure. You have had many conversations locally about the suitability of roundabouts at specific locations. We say things like consider at another, in the future when these locations are addressed, that might be an option, but we're just want to make sure we consider that a proven safety countermeasure, and we know that community engagement and historic preservation and community readiness are really important to making that decision about which of the effective proven safety countermeasures should be deployed at the places that are prioritized.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for the report. I think I'm so glad that we did this report. I know it was started under Patrick, and it really helps us prioritize. Looking at this report, I felt like, okay, if we could fix Milestone Rotary, fix Nobody or Farm Road, and focus on this stretch of Sparks Avenue and Old South Road, like, and get the striping and the reflections right, we'll be pretty far onto our goal. And, you know, we could have, to Nat's comment about the conversation on Gold Star Drive, yeah, it was, everyone should watch it. I mean, and my takeaway from that conversation, I mean, is Gold Star Drive in a butter's way? Is that the problem?
It's gotta be a public road.
It's a
They
public
wouldn't have been
road.
able to say all
The
that.
conversation about, so Gold Star Drive is used as a cut through, and the people along it have become to feel unsafe because of the way people frantically try to get around Milestone. So arguably, if we would fix Milestone, which is something we've been trying to do for 20 years, it wouldn't be needed as a cut through anymore. But the tenor of the conversation, just in talking about the community conversation, it was all about the impacts to property and noise for the people who live there. And it was not about, like, how many crashes have there been on, but never was it mentioned if there have been any crashes. So this conversation about safety in the community coming from what we now know over this report, I think is an outcome that would be very valuable to us. We can't think just about the people who live along the road. We have to think about the people who are using the road. I did have two questions about the report prior to it becoming released. So there are these appendices, public engagement memo, the full crash history memo, and then various treatments. And it says that that's going to be added before it's finalized. But since we're in what could you tell us a little bit more about what's going to be in those so that we can weigh whether or not it's important to include those for the public review period? That's just one question I have.
Sure, I can, I'm happy to answer that. I think, so the core of the appendices are just more detailed versions of the existing chapters of the plans that they represent. So for example, the treatment appendix is going to be pictures of the different types of treatments that are already recommended in the plan itself, discussion of where those treatments are most effective, just sort of a more spelled out version, as opposed to it might appear right now in the plan as a table. And you might go, I don't know what that is right now. I have to Google it. The place that you could Google it, quote unquote, in the plan would be that in that appendix. And that's where we'd sort of add a little bit more flesh on that bone. Same thing for the crash data and the engagement summary. We took sort of the highlights of both of those, and those are included in the crash data chapter and the engagement chapter. It's just additional charts, additional figures that tell a little bit more of the story. But anything that when we were looking through, we said, wow, that's a really interesting insight, or that feels like something that's critical as part of our planning work, that appears right now in the plan as it's before you. It's just essentially the totality of the work that we did. And we didn't want to make an already over 100-page document even more pages for you to review. So we tried, and I try as in quotes, to synthesize it a little bit because it's still a lot there.
Okay. So we'll get that though before we approve the report.
Yes.
Okay. And then I have a question just about to try to understand some of the methodology, because we're going to be making, you know, prioritizing things and making recommendations based on what the data is telling us. I'm trying to find it. So there's this, it's called the annual weighted crash severity frequency. And I'm looking at the roadway locations. It's on page 43 of the report. And so you have Sparks Avenue at Atlantic. Sorry, I'm pointing at a road, but it's called Sparks Avenue from Atlantic to Orange Street, really where we're sitting, is the most dangerous stretch of roadway on Nantucket based on the crash data. And it has this annual weighted crash severity frequency of 14.8. But the second most dangerous is this much longer stretch of Old South Road, but it has like half the weighted crash severity frequency. So I know it's a much longer road, but can you explain that a little bit as far as like how we're supposed to think about really because the real concern about saying, okay, this 0.7 mile section of Sparks Avenue is the most dangerous road. There's the school, the Boys and Girls Club, you know, the Stop and Shop, like there's a lot of bicyclists, pedestrians. It's frightening to me to think that that road that goes right by our school is the most dangerous stretch of road. And it's something we should all be concerned about. But then we have this next most dangerous, which has half the index. So could you just explain the methodology and how we should think about that?
Sure. So the process for that was we aggregated all of the crashes to the corridor level. And so what we did is we essentially divided the entire island's roadway network up into segments, and then we assigned the crashes to those segments. We also weighted the crashes so that the more severe crashes were weighted more heavily than crashes that did not involve someone getting injured. So for example, if we weighted all crashes evenly, you would just get every roadway network in downtown would be on that list because it would just be people crashing into parked cars over and over and over again. So the severity weighting allows us to differentiate between that outcome and outcomes in which we have more serious realities. And so part of that severity weighting as well is a normalization by roadway length. So you are going to see if you have shorter stretches of roads that have lots of crashes, you're going to see higher scores just because math. But that's not to say that those longer corridors are not still challenges. I think part of the conversation is also about what you have the resources to bite off. And so there might be opportunities where you can say we can do a mile-long corridor this year, but we probably can't do a 2-mile-long corridor. Do we do the 1-mile corridor on Sparks Ave? Do we just bite off the worst part of Old South? Like the goal here is to allow you some flexibility to think about this. We thought about it in bigger chunks just because if we thought about it in tiny little chunks, it wouldn't be meaningful for you all or for us to parse through. But all that is to say is that is the top scoring segment. There are other segments on there, and it's out of order because of that normalization in that chart right now. But Sparks Ave would be the number one if you were thinking about it just how you normally would. It's the place where the most and the most severe crashes are happening based on that weighting system.
So it's a true statement then that if you took a different segment of Old South, because Old South Road has had 2 fatal or severe injuries in the period, and Sparks had 1. So, but it has half the severity index, and that's because, if I understand what you're saying, because of the length. So it might be useful in the report to tell us which it's a 1.8 mile road. And we might be getting, I mean, it's still number 2, but do you see what I'm saying? Like, it might be helpful to have tell us which segment is most problematic. Maybe you did that in there. Anyway, I was just probing into how, how to interpret it.
No, check, right?
Yeah.
Follow up on what
Yeah.
you're saying, while we're on this topic, because you're bringing up something actually important that I didn't think to ask them before. But I don't know which person I'm supposed to be to. Zach, is it you? Right? You're the one that's on this whole pot. Okay, so what Hillary brought up to you, or bringing up the dangerous roads in your report. So I can name the 3 most dangerous roads on the island, but there may not have been any accidents in them. New Lane, Quidnet Road, and Walleye. Try to ride a bike on Quidnet Road. You can't see anything that's coming around the bars, and the road is like 17 feet wide. It's like ridiculous, okay? New Lane is absolutely, no question, the most dangerous road in the sense of like, you better be paying attention. But just because there's no accidents doesn't mean it's not a dangerous road. I like your point about the little like mirror breaking stuff and things like that. You don't get to the report like India Street. We just had a car turn over on Center Street in town. And then we had another vehicle drive into the pharmacy. Like, hello, no one's thinking about accidents like that, right? I think a lot of the stuff here, when you do your reports on actual, whether it's an accident where somebody got hurt. I don't want to say that doesn't matter. It does matter. But there's another segment of safety here that may not ever get to that statistical thing. I think that may be what Hillary's sort of touching on. That's what I got out of that last conversation. I'm like, wait a minute, we have other ways, other roads that are dangerous, but they may never get to your stat sheet. And by the way, Drew, I apologize for not knowing that you've come here all the time. I would not have spoken to you that way.
Well, I
You
could
gotta-
sense that
you
you
gotta
felt
think
that way
about
from the way you
that.
spoke to me, so it's no problem.
I would take you for a ride now. And we can look at the real stuff over here.
Well,
With
I will turn it back to Zach to just confirm that the how we could respond to the question about normalizing the segments by length to the earlier commissioner's point. But to the point of the roads that you consider to be dangerous because there are crashes of a sort happening on them that are alarming, I will say two things. We have the data that we had when we did the crash analysis to do this report, and there's typically a lag. So if the crash into the pharmacy, as an example, is something that happened in 2025 or even late in 2024, we wouldn't have that wouldn't have had that available to us in the analysis. That said, we not only use the reporting of crashes that happened to this point to prioritize locations, but as a reminder, the priorities were crash history, future crash risk, public feedback, equity, access to transit, closing bicycle and pedestrian gaps, coastal resilience, plan consistency, and proximity to key community assets. So it was not just a one-for-one ranking of the utilization of the crash data, which helps to inform your point that there are places maybe just by luck, nobody was injured in a crash, but it did happen. Separately, the crashes, by adopting a safe systems action plan, one has to agree to use reported crash data because that's our best data. And we've also we've already told you that even though it's our best data, it's not the best data. So, we look forward to your you advising and staff and like creating a system where the best data that is local can actually inform project scoping and projects in places where crashes haven't happened yet. So the way that this approach defines dangerous is actually on using those characteristics that I described, but starting as a basis with the crash reports themselves and the outcomes of those crashes.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I look forward to riding with you next spring though, for sure. We'll make that happen.
Yeah, what we wish for.
I'll just make one
second.
comment and then I'll
Go ahead.
go. I mean, I think though, Nat, you bring up a good point. This is the whole point of why they're asking us to release this to public comment. So that they can get that lens that they're not necessarily just finding in the numbers. So that's why this public comment, making sure we get people to participate and be engaged and involved is really important because they might not know, like you said, they don't know about Quidnet Road because if there aren't any accidents
Yeah.
there, like they won't know. So this is why it's really important for you or people who have this data to make sure that they participate and give it to them so they're aware. And Joe.
Thank you. So either Drew or Zach. So one of the things I was really curious, it seems like Old South Road, the traffic volume would be much higher than Sparks Ave. But at the same time, to Hillary's point, that's our school system. And so Surfside Road, Barlow Road, Pleasant Street access, that's all going towards the school. And I think that's really critical. And the last 2 weeks, riding down Barlow Farm Road, I've had 2 e-bikes literally come on the backside of me. One guy was, touched my back, my butt. And just nearly, I almost knocked him into the road. He almost went off the curb. It was just kind of scary. I felt bad for the guy, but I rang the bell and was trying to go around a pedestrian coming off the backside of him and never even, no bell, no sound, no nothing. So I really kind of feel like that road has more intensity than it's really kind of showing up in the data. So I don't want to flip anything, but it would be kind of interesting to say, does Old South Road have 1,000 cars per day, and Sparks Ave or Old South Road, Barlow Road has 500 cars. Is that really something that should be weighted as well? And going back to the e-bikes, yes, we have a speed limit now on the bike pass. We need to get the signage up and stuff like that. But I also feel like you're right. The weight of those e-bikes of going and at same speeds as a motorcycle or a scooter. But I don't understand why they're not being, required to get a license or have this, but, and I'm not trying to knock e-bikes, I'm not trying to, it's a great mode of transportation. I'm trying to get something going with the school system, all the bike, shops and work together and maybe get some permitting for the underage kids for, you know, 12 years old and up to the age of 18 or whatever it is, 16. To get some permits, so they are educated and get the proper helmets and the sheriff's all on board, stuff like that. But I think there's more stuff we gotta do with the state and I just don't know what's that next step to do. I know I've done some things with Nantucket with BPAC, but I just think there's more we could do on that level because I feel like someone's gonna get killed and speaking to the fire department, speaking to Dr. Lepre, they're really nervous about what's going on in Nantucket. But at the same time, when I brought up my articles, the first thing, a couple of police officers, my friends, were like, well, who's enforcing this? You know, and it's kind of tough. Like, what do? You know, am I putting something together that's going nowhere? Or it's not going to happen. But at the same time, like, if it is in place, then that's important. It's an important piece that we need. And hopefully the state will read it like we should be doing this. But I just feel like e-bike start as a great concept. But then once you run over 20 miles an hour, it's kind of been the Wild West. There's no education. They feel like they're flying. There's no helmets. There's no signage on them, no brake lights or lights or anything like that. And as Bert Johnson told me, he was riding up to his home in Milestone Road and there was an e-bike right alongside of him on the bike path. So, you know, it's just kind of a crazy kind of thing that's been going on. But to Mike's signage, you were talking that we have those 4 signs. And the one thing that I will say was effective was that when those are up or there was a chain of signage, that the police was involved. They were sitting on the roadway, being, you know, right in front of the signage. A couple of my family members got, you know, warnings. I won't mention any name, Patrick, but you got pulled over. But I think that was a really helpful thing for them to work together with you to kind of help that. And then, you know, I've been driving on the road since 16, and there's a, you know, miles per hour reduction on the roadway. It's kind of like you're ingrained. You're like, oh, on Cliff Road, 40 miles an hour. And you're going along, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait, the sign, it should be down and lower or whatever. But the other thing I'm noticing in my truck is I'll be on the sign that says 25, but my truck will have a sign that says, you know, speed limit's 40.
Yeah.
So there's some of this technology where someone comes down and they don't know the speed limit, it'd pop up like you're going over the speed limit. So I think there's some things we can be doing and working together. But we just need to figure out how do we get that to the state to kind of come back and the signage. But those are kind of my observations that I've seen. So thank you.
Christina and then Mike.
I just have a question on clarification. So this has been in the works for a year and a half, developed a 109-page document, very thorough. It's gonna go out for public comment, and then the intention is to vote in August to approve it. But even right here, I've heard all kinds of other things that people seem to want to see in this document. And just the difference between being completely data-driven as they've taken it, but then there's other parts. I'm just curious, how does that work? How do you handle the public comment if you get a lot of public comment of things that people want to see in this document, but then we're asked to vote on it next month?
Good question.
Madam Chair, if it's all right, I think we want to have the 21-day public review. We're ending that on the 21st to give some time to synthesize what we hear back from the public. Hopefully we get good comments and good support for the goals and priorities and these focus area corridors that we've identified. Hopefully there's a lot of support to that. I don't think it's a huge lift to maybe add some language about e-bike or encouraging asking the state for help with the e-bike legislation, because that's kind of a critical issue for the local community. If we do get overwhelming feedback from the public about, you know, I don't think this is going to happen, but if we just missed the point and like there's these other set of corridors that need attention, I don't think that's going to happen. But if it did, Madam Chair, I think we have time built into the budget and the timeline for the project to where we could extend out or add a few more weeks, or maybe even take this up at the September meeting to close out the or incorporate those edits and then kind of close out the effort and have a final document before the end of the contract with our consulting team. So I think we kind of built that in a little bit. I don't think we want to take advantage of that. So it gives them time to kind of wrap everything up and gives us time to kind of report to the feds on the grant. But there is that flexibility kind of built in if it's needed.
Great. Mike had a comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, mine's less of a question and more of a comment, but it's roadside plants. That should be a simple one, but it's not that easy because they're the gift that keeps on giving. They just grow back. And for example, nobody here in Hinsdale, there's where my shop is, somebody has a privet hedge right along the roadway. You have to fully be out in the oncoming lane of traffic to see what's coming. Like, I don't even know why that's allowed to persist, but last year I worked on it with the DPW. It took quite a while to get done. It's done, but it grew back to the point now where it's just a huge problem again. So it's, again, more of a comment. I don't know how we work that in for, like, people have to take responsibility for their plantings, or they should be taken out.
The encroachment policy.
Is it
Big deal.
in the layout?
I don't, it's in public road.
Well,
I think it is.
no, but it's,
No,
Not-
he's there.
but it's right on Nobodere, like where you
Yeah.
cross,
Yeah.
like where the dirt part
Yeah.
goes across to go into like Toscana's. Somebody's got a privet hook hedge like right on
Yeah.
the road there.
Coffee.
And the only reason there hasn't been an accident is because gridlock most of the time.
Yeah, he's slow already.
But this does also go back to my point that let's make sure these things that we're talking about get into the public comment so that they can incorporate it into the board.
Yeah, one of the things at BPAC on Pleasant Street, we were looking at the new roadway that Mike had brought up. And one of the things that we found was all the encroachment on the right-hand side going it down is right on the street. And I don't know if it's beyond their lot
Yeah.
line or what is going on. But it is something that, Arcus File said he's gonna start looking into. So there was some of that problem.
But I think it's a great point, especially when you're talking about visibility, because like you said, nobody or farm is parking lot most of the time. It doesn't mean it's okay that there's no visibility, because it just takes one person.
And it doesn't even have to be privet hedges. Trees eventually hang low and get into the visibility. Cars are high, low. It's.
Yeah.
It is a good point, Mark, because our road is definitely a public road. And it was all cut back, I guess, by the town 2 years ago. Now it's grown back, but I'm not sure whether I'm allowed to like just, go out there and
Go for
get
it.
it done.
into
Yeah, or, is that, am I gonna get a notice that I shouldn't have done that? So.
I will say the DPW app works very well.
Yeah.
It's very good. They're they're very quick on it.
If it's a public road, you should do that first.
And you don't want to cut down trees because then you have to deal with Dale.
I mean,
So I wanted to ask about the DPW. The DPW used to be on this commission because we're always talking about this stuff. How involved was Drew Patno in this, developing this? Or how involved will he be?
It was in one of the images.
Madam Chair, we have what I call traffic safety staff. It's myself, the DPW director, the police chief, fire chief, and town administration representative. They were part of the, I don't want to call it steering, well, effectively it was a steering committee. We bounced all the data, the spatial analysis. These recommendations were vetted with that team, especially the crash and the fatalities and serious injury rates that we've projected out. And then just make sure that, are y'all comfortable with this? Are y'all comfortable with prioritizing these corridors? So they were very helpful, and especially with the recommendations for Surfside Road and the need to improve markings and whatnot. DPW is definitely in support of that, and I think it's just programming that into a work order and starting a program of implementing what Drew and Zach had explained were these systemic safety strategies to make sure everything's maintained well. We have fresh signs that are highly reflective. The markings are the crosswalks are marked well, and not just that, but we actually have a facility for them to be on, and they're driving at a safe speed on that path, and an appropriate bicycle and not a moped or anything like this. So very involved, Madam Chair.
Great, thank you. Any other?
Yeah, I had one clarification as well. Thanks. I'm really glad to hear that because obviously the DPW is gonna have to do a lot of this stuff and striping and everything. But are you also asking us, Mike, to prioritize these two? I'm just looking at the presentation. And you did a bunch of, like on page 26, you have Old South Road and you have everything called out. And then you have Surfside Road on page, or slide 27, and everything called out. Are you also asking this commission to say that these are the two priorities? Because after the, thank you slide, you have Sparks Avenue, slide 35, Bartlett Road, slide 36, Pleasant Street, you have other, snapshots. Are you asking us to also say these are the priorities, these two corridors that we want to work on?
Madam Chair, and I believe in the goals that are part of the package here. There's this promise that not only will safety be prioritized as consideration for investment in capital projects, but the projects need to live on this high injury network, which is, we've screened all the data, located them spatially and the severity, and we've identified these 5 priority corridors which attention needs to be focused. And the idea is that there's this promise that investments will be focused in those priority corridors. The sequencing of each one of those elements that are highlighted, where it's make sure that the crossings are very visual and apparent to everyone the signage is great, but there's also some capital investments that those may not necessarily be like the number one intersection improvement. I'm picking on the Surfside and Bartlett Road roundabout, which is part of that package of recommendations for both Surfside and Bartlett Road. That might not be the project that gets done first, but all the other package of portfolio of recommendations for those corridors, those should be prioritized, especially the access to the NRTA stops that are already in the works for Bartlett Road. Those are not very accessible bus stops at all. The crosswalks aren't great. Same for Old South Road. Those bus stops are not very accessible. There's not a path along the south side of Old South Road and much of the corridor. A lot of those smaller improvements could go a long way to reducing the number of fatal and severe crashes, which ultimately is the goal. We do want to do these capital improvements and some of the easy low-hanging fruit maintenance improvements like painting and signage. But there's also, let's not lose sight of the cultural things that we want to do. I've kind of said, like a broken record, that texting and driving will solve 20% of the problem. And that's an easy thing to do. Just put your phone down when you're driving. And I've already had conversations with the Chamber of Commerce and other folks about what are some programs that we can get the community involved to actually getting serious about doing that. But those are cultural things that we can do as well as to, kind of go along with our sticker programs that we have for bike helmets, the sticker programs for e-bikes, and the educational programs that the police department does to educate young bike riders of rules of the road and what you can and can't do and best practices. So all this together, and that's why we call it holistic, all this together will help us ideally achieve the goal of no fatal or serious crashes, as well as some of these other smaller improvements that we can do as well to improve the sense of safety on some of the corridors that don't necessarily have the data to suggest that there's a problem. But I think what you've all suggested is like traffic calming elements and speed humps. Even though the data may not support it, it's probably a good idea to do just to make everyone feel safe. So happy to follow up if there's any other questions for the response.
This is a question to Mike. How does this plan, if we adopt this plan, how does this either compete or coincide with the other projects that we have kind of in discussion? The Novadear Farm roundabout and the work out to Bunker Road. We've talked about other projects. Like, I'm just curious, are these competing? Does one take precedent over another? Does one negate one over the other? I was just curious.
I'll let Mike answer, but I think we need to remember, we're as a commission, we're advisory, but like, we're not micromanaging people's jobs. And so from what I understand from Mike's telling us is like, let's keep in mind that all of these groups are working together to do their full-time daily job. So like, I would imagine, I do not think that like, if we have this report, that it should be kind of contravening what these departments are planning to do for their projects. And Mike's saying there are some considerations that obviously are outside of the control of like capital expenditure, things like that, but we're not gonna come in and just have a bunch of brand new things that we're gonna give these departments, because they're working together with Mike and this team. So I think we just need to remember to think about it as we're working to kind of like formalize and do a database approach, but we're not gonna come in and like suddenly tell the DPW, like, you guys need to do X, Y, Z. Like, we hope they're already working on this and working together with them, and this is more formalizing that. And Mike, I mean, I don't know if there's more you want to add to that.
And I'll say that the two top intersections, the Milestone Rotary and the Nobody Farm Road, if it's not next month, the month after, we're going to have a discussion at this arena about those two projects because they're already advancing. And if this report does anything, it helps support the and justify why, you know, keeping those projects on a path to implementation, because they are the top two intersection projects. What we don't really want to happen is, you know, a number of years ago, we did an Old South Road corridor study where I identified a lot of these improvements that I shared with Drew and Zach, and like, hey, look, these projects have already been thought about. And for whatever reason, they haven't been implemented yet. But what this report would help us do is give us, you know, help justify the funding argument. And Leslie Snell's, you know, we're trying to put together a table of previous capital requests that we put together. It's really that table, along with this type of quantified approach to you know, putting data to the argument as well, I think helps keep those get those projects funded, and if they are funded, keep them prioritized, because we have data that suggests that there's, you know, we're at the end of the day, we're going to achieve what the community feels is a very important goal to having this be a safer community. And if we don't keep those projects prioritized and keep them on track, we're on the path of trending in the wrong direction and not achieving our goals.
And can I just, one minute,
Yeah.
what Christina said about.
I also do want to keep in mind, all we're doing today.
I know.
is voting on the public comment.
I know.
We can still continue
But
this discussion next time.
The problem is, this is like, this stuff goes back like 22, 23 years of these. That's what Mike just kind of brought up there without saying it. And that is a big deal. I wanted to just clarify what you said though, Christina, about the Bunker Road. You're talking about the widening Milestone to Bunker, which may have not, everybody might not know that, but that was part of the state plan out to Tom Nevers when they jiggled the intersection of Tom Nevers and made it sort of a right turn instead of a sort of an angle turn, right? That's why I wanted to say that real quick. And then the Milestone Rotary is a state project, Mike, right?
Yes, those milestone projects are being advanced by Mass DOT.
Okay. Want to make that clear. Thank you.
Yeah, can I just touch on the project that Mike referenced? So we are working on a project internally going back to the year 2000, just because I thought that was a good starting point to put together a history of projects that have been advanced by this commission to the extent that we can. Projects that have, you know, been supported by staff, by you, have been put on the warrant for town meeting, that have, you know, may or may not have been subject to appropriations, and where that project is now. So, you know, I think we hear a lot about, you know, no one's doing anything and the congestion and the traffic and how come nothing's done. It's like, well, you know, the various boards, committees and commissions and the staff can only take projects so far. If the voters don't approve them at town meeting, if they don't appropriate the funds, then we have to, you know, start over. And Nat's dubbed this the amnesia project. And
it's true.
And, you know, the Milestone Rotary, for example, I've been here 23 years. We've been talking about it all 23 of those years and probably well before I arrived. So there's a lot of, you know, sort of legacy projects that just, for whatever reason, have not made it through the voters, really.
So the wooden roundabout, right? To give you an example of what happened. So in the wooden roundabout that, I guess it got mixed reviews, but they couldn't move it to the right because of some water company's thing and it was in the way there. All right, but when that got voted at town, and at the ballot box, was the day they closed one direction coming out of Monomoy or onto, it was a huge backup of traffic because they were doing some water connection or sewer connection. I can't remember what it was. On the day we voted for it. Like, are you sure? We had to do it that day and we lost, I think, by 7 votes. It was under 10. I'm pretty sure I'm right about that. And it's like, only on the Nantucket could we have, this project went through all this work. And then they did a detour in the same area to cause more traffic on the day we voted. Guarantee you that caused that 7 votes or whatever. So then First Way is the best one. No question. First Way was the worst idea in the world, was to fix First Way, until it was the greatest idea in the world to fix First Way. And it goes back to the mid-90s with the cut through to Willie House's gravestone of Joe, which you are probably the only person on the that's remember that. So now people are probably saying, why isn't it wider? Just relax. It's fine the way it is. We're lucky to even have it. So it's gonna take us till I'm 80 something, and me and David down at our little deal we got. I hope it happens. New whale tree. But anyway,
With that, is anybody willing to give me a motion?
we do have to put the September thing. I think Mike is right about that. Do we have to include that, Mike, or whatever?
I
No,
think
we
that's,
don't.
No, because we have to see what we get for the.
Okay.
Yeah.
But at next
Maybe
meeting,
we
we
can
can
decide.
decide if we want it.
I think that Mike's idea is good.
Are we asking for certain, for Mike to take the lead on adding certain things
Stuff he
in the
talked about.
appropriate place throughout the report?
We wouldn't know until,
No, she's talking about the public review, I think.
yeah, I think
Yeah,
after
so we
that.
got some feedback about, like, we'd like to see specific mention about trimming the vegetation, and we'd like to see specific, and he would find where to fit that in. And then that's amended document.
And any more comments, email
Yeah,
as well.
Oh,
I
yeah.
agree, because that's all part of that's part of the public comment. So anyway, yeah.
And
Are we talking about amending it before it goes out for public review or using that information as part of the public review?
I think we should use it as part of the public review. I don't think we should amend it again. I think we do.
Okay, I
Once
just
it's
wanted
ready.
to,
I wasn't clear on that, so thank you.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
And I'm still a little confused. I know we had these scenarios that are highlighted in the slide, these corridors that we want to focus on. And those are the priority corridors, but are we saying, I guess what I'm saying is I certainly think that Sparks, given the school network and the severity index, should be a high priority. So if based on the order of the slide, you're saying that Old South and Surfside are our highest priority corridor, and that the other ones have been identified, but maybe are lower priority. I guess
Can
might be,
address that as a start, if it's okay. Sorry, Madam Chair, to interrupt.
no, I'd
the-
love to, I was a little confused though.
Yeah,
The plan, and I encourage your thorough review, because some of the things that you discussed today are in the plan already, so that will simplify some of the amendments that we'll make. But with respect to the corridor cut sheets, we felt we were constrained on time. The 5 concepts that we illustrated in the plan, and the 3 of which we did not talk about today, are sitting at the moment as a priority because they, as Mike was describing earlier, they build off not only the history of crashes, but also the input related to the other factors to prioritize key locations. They're all high priority. It will be up to you to decide which ones to advance with the cooperation of your staff after the plan is adopted, because in no small part, the work that advances these safety corridors is opportunistic. And we want to make sure we didn't put you in a position where you had to say which one needs to be done first, because the funding might align with another one of the 5.
Yeah, thank you. That's very helpful. I appreciate that.
okay.
Um,
So,
looking for a moment.
anybody want to give me a motion?
I'll give a motion to open the public review period.
So motion to authorize the 21-day public review period starting August 1st and concluding on August 21st. Second. Okay, second by Mike. All right, Dave.
Aye.
Joe.
Aye.
John.
Aye.
Hillary.
Aye.
Mike.
Aye.
Christina. Aye. Liza.
Aye.
Brooke.
I didn't need to be roll call because I didn't.
You stuck in between everybody else.
How do you vote on it?
Came in, he popped
Yeah,
on.
he snuck in. Nat
Aye.
and Chair, I also vote aye. Okay, next thing on the agenda, are there any committee reports?
Megan, do you mind? Because you had a Nantucket area plan.
Oh, yeah, sure. I can give a quick, high level overview. I had a meeting with Bruce Mandel on Friday, that went really well to discuss the Nantucket area plan, where they're at, how staff can kind of get them over the finish line. Because what I understand is they've all been working really hard, spent a lot of time, put a ton of hours in. They've done surveys, they've begun to draft the sections, and I think maybe a little bit more hands-on help from staff to kind of steer that to the end would be helpful. So you can expect that they will be before you to have a boundary extension approved at your next meeting. Currently, their boundary goes really at the end of Nantucket. It doesn't encompass parts of Tristram's Landing. It doesn't go up to Clark's Cove. It doesn't include the dump, just areas that I think we all would consider to be Nantucket. So you as a commission can discuss that with them next month to, either accept or reject, or just have that discussion with them to extend those boundaries. From there, I think we talked about, depending on the availability of the group, scheduling a second meeting. So it would be 2 meetings per month. They've currently been limited to 1 meeting per month with an hour time limit because they've been utilizing the town administration Zoom committee Zoom login. So we'll extend the allowance of the Plus login to try and, generate just more routine meeting, and kind of take it from there. So I think, that's in a good spot. I gave Bruce the matrix that Judy Barrett, and her team have been using, just compiling the points for each section, to be included in the master plan. So Bruce has distributed that to the group, just to kind of the sense of urgency that we have to get this wrapped up so we can get the proper recommendation included into the final version of the master plan. So that in a nutshell is kind of what we discussed.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
I have 2 things. For the Rural Policy Advisory Committee, I believe the commission voted to have Megan participate in that. The Rural Policy Advisory Committee, as well as the Ocean Plan Advisory Committee, which isn't on the list. Those are both subject to an appointment by the governor. The governor has not made any appointments to a lot of committees, not just this. I've touched on with some other people at the state about that. So Megan did attend the Rural Policy Advisory Committee meeting anyway, because they're continuing to function even though all of their appointments have expired. And the Ocean Plan, we're just waiting to hear back from the governor on who will be appointed to that.
Anything else? Okay, I take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay. Dave. Joe. John.
Aye.
Hillary. Aye. Mike.
Aye.
Christina. Aye. Liza.
Aye.
Brooke.
Hi.
Bert.
Aye.
Yeah. And thank you, everyone. And we will see you next month.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
Planning board. Meeting.
Yeah.
For discussion, just so I can have some guidance on what it is I'm drafting. For what? ADUs. Oh, yeah.
What town meeting? Ben?
Oh, hold on. Sorry, Liza.
You need to talk about.
No.
What is that?
Sort of what?